Okay, can everybody hear me all right? All right. So my name is Kris Gerardi. I am a research economist at the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. So Raphael is my boss. Let me start. We have a great panel. We're going to be talking about housing affordability issues. And it's going to include a discussion at the sort of national, state, and local levels. Let me start with a brief introduction for all three of the panelists, because I'm assuming they have broad, sort of diverse backgrounds, and not everybody here is going to know who they are. So first, let me start by introducing Brenda Breaux in the middle. She's the executive director for the New Orleans Redevelopment Authority, or NORA. Before this role, she was the chief operating officer for the Redevelopment Authority, where she was responsible for overseeing and managing human resources, land management, land stewardship, real estate development, and the day-to-day operations of the authority. Prior to coming to the Redevelopment Authority, she was the senior chief deputy city attorney for the city of New Orleans, where she managed an army of attorneys and support staff with responsibilities for housing development and finance issues. She also spent time at the Housing Authority of New Orleans. Brenda has almost 30 years of experience in the affordable housing space. Here in New Orleans, she earned her bachelor's degree in political science from Spelman College and her JD from Loyola University of New Orleans College of Law, and she's a licensed attorney. Brenda also serves as vice president for Housing NOLA and policy committee co-chair for the City of New Orleans 10-year housing plan. Furthest away from me, Marjorianna Willman is the executive director for the Louisiana Housing Corporation. Before her current role as executive director, she served in several positions at the LHC, including chief operating and legal officer and deputy program director. At the Louisiana Housing Corporation, Marjorianna has helped to produce several successful programs aimed at increasing affordable housing in the local community here in New Orleans, including the Blue Tarp Roofing Repair Program, the Middle Market Loan Program, and the Rural Rental Rehab Program, among others. Marjorianna also served in the role of executive director of the New Orleans Office of Housing Policy and Community Development. She has almost 2 decades of experience in the affordable housing industry here in New Orleans. Marjorianna earned her Bachelor of Science degree from LSU and her JD from the Southern University Law Center. And last but not least, certainly, closest to me is Laurie Goodman. And Laurie is an Institute Fellow and the founder of the Housing Finance Policy Center at the Urban Institute, which provides policymakers data-driven analyses of housing finance policy issues. Before joining the Urban Institute, Laurie had a highly distinguished career at several Wall Street firms. Laurie was the senior managing director at Amherst Securities Group. And prior to that position, she was the head of global fixed income research and manager of U.S. securitized products research at UBS. Laurie actually began her career as an economist at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. So she knows exactly how tough my job is.
That's why I laughed.
Exactly. Laurie earned her Bachelor of Arts degree in mathematics from the University of Pennsylvania, her PhD in economics from Stanford. She currently serves on the board of directors at several financial firms and is on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's Consumer Advisory Board. So, with that out of the way, as you can tell from the introductions, we have a highly distinguished panel with lots of experience in the housing affordability space. We're going to start with Laurie. So we're going to start. Each panelist is going to give some remarks that they prepared, and then I'm going to ask a few questions based on those remarks, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So we're going to start with Laurie. Laurie's going to talk a little bit more about national issues in this space, and then Marjorianna is going to talk about state level issues, and then finally Brenda will talk about more localized issues to the New Orleans community. So without further ado, Laurie.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to pick up a lot of the themes that Raphael started with, and then Marjorianna and Brianna are going to actually follow very nicely on a lot of the points I'm going to make. So basically, nationwide, housing has never looked less affordable. Prices and rents are basically at an all-time high. Mortgage rates are relatively high. Upon further breakdown, though, it's really the story of the haves versus the have-nots. Renters face an affordability crisis which has deepened over the last few years. By contrast, most homeowners are sitting prettier than they ever have before, although those who want to become home buyers, that is first-time home buyers, are struggling. So let's actually look at each of these three pieces. So let's look at the renters first. And again, Raphael made these came up with very similar numbers. 50% of renter households, or 22.5 million of the 45 million U.S. renter households, are cost-burdened. That is, they spend more than 30% of their income on rent. This is up 3.2% from 2019, as rents have increased faster than incomes over the period. Not surprised, this is the continuation of a long trend. Since 2001, rents are up 21% in real terms, while renter incomes are up just 2%. And these problems are not surprisingly most acute for the lowest income renters, who are disproportionately cost-burdened. Affordable units are disappearing quickly. The Joint Center for Housing Studies notes that in 2022, just 7.2 million units had contract rents under $600, which is the maximum affordable to the 26% of renters with incomes under $24,000. This marks a loss of 2.1 million units since 2012 when adjusting for inflation. The spike in asking rents during the pandemic accelerated this trend, with more than 500,000 low-income units lost between 2019 and 2022. So this leaves the 11.7 million lowest income renters short about 4.5 million affordable units, and that's where the biggest struggle is. The obvious solution here is expand the housing choice voucher program. The cost for the Center for Budget Priorities shows that 3 out of 4 renters who qualify for these vouchers do not receive them. Think about it. You qualify, and the money is just not appropriated for you to get a voucher. And this requires money. It requires appropriations. There's no easy solution. Now let's turn to the homeowner side. Existing homeowners have done quite well over the last few years, thank you. About 24% of homeowners are cost burdened, but this share is much higher for elderly homeowners. 39% for those 65 to 74, and 50% for those 75 and older. However, being cost-burdened doesn't impact homeowners the same way as it impacts renters, because homeowners have wealth, both financial assets and home equity that they can tap into. The median homeowner wealth is close to $400,000, according to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finance, and about half of that is in housing wealth. Due to robust home price appreciation as well as financial market appreciation, the median homeowner wealth has increased by over 100,000 from 2019 to 2022. But that's not the only thing that's helped homeowners over the last few years. Cost burdens for homeowners with a mortgage have gone down as they've refinanced. The New York Fed estimated that about a third of the mortgage balances were refinanced during the low-rate period from the second quarter of 2020 through the fourth quarter of 2021. This represented about 14 million borrowers. Another 17% of borrowers locked in low rates through their purchases during this period. So existing homeowners are doing quite well, thank you. Now let's talk about the third pillar of this, getting renters into home ownership. Home prices have gone up by more than both rents and inflation. From the fourth quarter of 2019 through the fourth quarter of 2023, home prices are up 47%, rents are up 30%, and the CPI is up 19.3%. And Raphael talked a little bit about how the median cost burden for new homeowners is very, very high. That is, the median person would have to spend 41% of their income to get into a home now, given median prices and interest rates. So this obviously hurts the renter who wants to become a first-time home buyer. Higher rents means it's harder to save for that down payment. Higher home prices make it even harder, and higher interest rates make it still harder to qualify for a mortgage. So what are some of these solutions here? So obviously the biggest barrier is down payments. It's hard to save. 30% of potential homeowners said they'd use gifts from family members to fund down payments. But what about those who don't have family members who can give them money? FHA data shows that those who use government down payment assistance has actually tripled from 5% in 2010 to 15% in 2023. We need to both increase knowledge about the 1,700 down payment assistance programs out there, as well as provide first-generation down payment assistance for those who don't have family wealth through parental home ownership. Freddie Mac has taken some steps to standardize and distribute information on the down payment programs that are out there through DPA-1, but it's in its very, very early stages. So again, down payments, solution, down payment assistance. Then when you think about how borrowers qualify for a mortgage, there's sort of three measures of creditworthiness that lenders tend to rely on: credit score, loan-to-value ratio, and debt-to-income ratio. So I think two of them need to be rethunk. Let's talk about credit score. When you talk about credit score, you're talking only about your FICO score, which by and large doesn't include on-time rental payments. So only about 10% of consumers have have rental payments included in their credit score information, because most landlords don't report that. In addition, the model that is used to qualify borrowers is actually an old FICO model. It's FICO 4, FICO's now on FICO 10, and so it really doesn't consider these on-time rental payments. Freddie and Fannie both have small programs where they do consider on-time rental payments, but it's in its infancy, and essentially the way they get this data is they say, oh, this borrower is really close. If we could access 12 months of bank statements and find your rental payments in that, we would qualify you that way. So credit score has to become more inclusive, and it has to include on-time rental payments as well as telecom and utility bills. When you think about income, the way we qualify a borrower is you need consistent income for a 2-year period. Well, think about that school teacher. She's gotten a 9-month job, teaches summer school 2 out of every 3 years, and tutors on the side. She will lose the tutoring income. She will lose the summer school income. We'll have that 9-month income. Think about that person who works full-time and sometimes drives an Uber 5 hours a week and sometimes drives an Uber 20 hours a week. They will be lucky to get that 5 hours a week counted. So debt to income, as it's currently constructed, doesn't work well for those who are self-employed or partially self-employed. It doesn't consider family members that are on the deed, that are not on the deed but contribute to the housing payment. So, I think we need to rethink what both credit scores and debt to income ratios. Most importantly, I think we need to expand the credit box. And I always hear, we only want sustainable home ownership. We only want people to be able to get into a home who can afford it. Well, I don't know actually what that means, and I've been doing mortgages for 30 years. There's very few people who will pay their mortgage 100% of the time. There are very few people who will pay their mortgage 0% of the time. For most of us, we have a probability of default. And the ability to build wealth would argue that we ought to be able to tolerate a higher probability of default than we currently are. Yes, if you if you get into home ownership and you fail, you're worse off than if you had never been there. But you're a little bit worse off than if you've never been there, but if you get into home ownership and you succeed, that is your opportunity to build wealth. So I would argue that we've been way too restrictive in terms of the credit box. In addition, all the models that we use are calibrated off the great financial crisis, where there was a lot of fraud of all types by income, and we haven't recalibrated our models. In addition, and I would argue very, very importantly, when you think of mortgage losses, they're in 3 pieces. You've got the rate at which borrowers go 90 days delinquent. You've got the 90-day delinquent to foreclosure transition rate, and then you've got the loss severity when a loss occurs. That middle piece has actually been cut very, very substantially. We estimate by about 46% because of improvements in the loss mitigation toolkit since the great financial crisis. We made improvements through the great financial crisis. We made improvements as a result of natural disasters, and then further improvements were made during COVID, and those COVID policies have since become permanent. So we've cut that middle piece, which gives us a lot of room to expand that marginal probability of default. So I would argue that a wider credit box is in order. So with that, let me conclude my remarks. Again, renters are struggling, existing homeowners sitting pretty, those first-time home buyers are struggling.
Okay, thank you very much, Laurie. Now we'll have Marjorianna.
Thank you. I'd like to just give a brief overview about Louisiana Housing Corporation for anyone who does not know. It is a housing finance agency. There are 56 in the United States. Louisiana Housing Corporation is the main office is located, well, all the offices are in Baton Rouge, but we have 3 different locations. The main office is on Quail. We have 160 employees. And our work is pretty much divided into 5 different categories. We provide multifamily housing, whether it's new construction or rehab, home ownership opportunities, we call that single-family development, homelessness solutions, we work with homeless populations, and then we provide the supportive services for weatherization, energy assistance, and then lastly, disaster and recovery. And all 3 of those, not all 3, I'm sorry. Each one of those areas are equally important, and they all play a role in affordability and housing stability. I'm grateful to Ms. Laurie. I think she did a great job outlaying some of the issues that we see in Louisiana. Louisiana Housing Corporation serves the entire state. And we see different issues in different areas. Different parts of the state want different interventions. Some parts of the state say, some areas we go into, particularly rural areas, may say we don't want large multifamily developments. And just about everywhere in the state say we want home ownership. And obviously, absolutely, home ownership is an avenue for wealth building. And it's a great opportunity for those when they're ready for it. But we do see lots of challenges on the home ownership side. And part of them, like was said earlier, the cost of home ownership. But what we're also seeing, and is causing us to look at it a little differently, is just a shortage supply because many folks took advantage of the lower interest rates. And those people are what you might call locked in. So where in the past, we would see people downsizing, some people retiring, downsizing, maybe moving, selling their home, adding more housing to the marketplace. We're not seeing that right now because folks don't want to leave that 3%, 3.5%, in some cases even 2+ percent interest rate that they locked into for something that's now more expensive with the interest rate that may be 7+%. So that's even exacerbated the issue. There's just a shortage of home ownership opportunities. So what we're doing is identifying different priorities, what we want to look at, how we can improve all those different 5 categories that I mentioned earlier. And one way to do that is to reframe the issue of affordability and housing instability. There are more people that need to come to the table. A lot of times, what we have seen in the past, we have our investors, we have our developers, the financiers, we have our advocates, but we don't have enough industry at the table because home ownership is not just an issue for a person who lacks affordable housing, but it's an issue also for industry. It's an issue for government, not just housing-related government, but all of those different governmental agencies that are there to help when there's a crisis. For example, when there's a homelessness crisis, there are so many different industries that are impacted and governmental agencies that are impacted when those numbers go up. So we really want to broaden and invite others to the table and make sure others understand how housing affordability affects them. I think that there's money that could be tapped into if we did that. So that's very important to us. Another thing is, in the last 3 years, LHC has allocated about $1 billion in CDBG disaster funds and tax credits for affordable housing, either in the form of home ownership or multifamily housing. I think it's time for us to step back, which is something that we're in the process of doing now, and doing a statewide housing needs assessment. It's been 3 years since we've done that. Everybody knows there's a need, but what is that particular need and where is it? And what intervention is best for that particular need? One issue that we're dealing with a lot is insurance. I sat with the insurance commissioner last week, Tim Temple, to talk about that, and we're looking at it in a couple different ways. One of them is to build back and build better. Fortified roofs, we know when roofs are fortified, when there's damage that is derived as a result of hurricanes, tornadoes, wind, water, when that roof stays on, the damage is less. So then we have less relocation, we have less disaster recovery, less temporary housing issues, and less displacement of folks and losing permanent housing. So fortified housing, building back stronger, is very important to us. So not just on the home ownership side, but on multifamily side. So we are working to provide funding opportunities for fortified roofs, fortified windows, amenities that would help those who have houses stay in their houses, and also as we develop and build housing, it's built stronger than in the past. One other tool that's been helpful to us in New Orleans is our pilot. We have a payment in lieu of taxes. That's been used for multifamily developments where taxes are maintained at a lower rate over a period of time, maybe 5 years, sometimes higher, depending on what that local government can tolerate in terms of lost revenue. We're looking at ways to expand that across the state. It's done very well here. And one of the operators of that program has been Finance New Orleans. It's done very good here. It's helping to fill that gap, and so we're looking to spread that around the state. Preservation is a big deal. We have developments that were funded through Go Zone, Katrina Rita funding that are starting to come up to the end of their affordability period. And so does that owner want to remain affordable, or will they choose to go market rate? So we want to have funding and tools available that would entice that owner to stay affordable, at least a portion of those units remain affordable. So it's two-pronged. It's not just developing affordable housing, but it's also maintaining the housing that we have and maintaining it in a condition where it's safe and habitable. And I'll leave it there. Happy to answer any questions. We can go into a lot of different directions, but I'll stop there.
Okay. Thank you, Marjorianna.
Yeah.
And now Brenda.
All right. Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank Kris for having us here, but more importantly, for my other colleagues that are here presenting this afternoon on this topic of affordability. We've heard earlier today on the levels of affordability that I guess doesn't necessarily discriminate, to be quite frank with you, and how that has been impacting on a national level, on a state level, and I'll have an opportunity to talk about that impact on affordability at a local level, really talking about the production of affordable housing opportunities and what that might look like. Step back just a little to talk about the Redevelopment Authority. We're a quasi-governmental entity servicing just in the New Orleans area. We serve as a catalyst in redevelopment on housing and commercial revitalization. That's our mission. We have 4 core business lines of affordable housing, commercial revitalization, land stewardship, and some strategic redevelopment that kind of speaks to our housing affordability issue. One of my colleagues is here, and what I'd like to capture is, as we talk about housing affordability, particularly here in the city of New Orleans, one of the things that we have commissioned at the Redevelopment Authority is that we do a market value analysis and determining where we as a public entity might be able to make our investments. Those strategic investments, we've all talked about scarce resources, we've all talked about the increased cost of construction, the increased cost of insurance here that impacts both multifamily and single-family home ownership. We've talked about interest rates that have been increasing. We've talked about individuals who may need lots of additional dollars. So as a local organization and as a city, I ask ourselves, where do we make our investments? What tools or things do we use as a redevelopment authority and for making our investments? We at one point we are a depository for a lot of the former road home properties. We originally had about 5,100 properties. To date, we have right under 975. So we've been strategic as to how we develop that, but putting those out in the form of creating housing opportunities. So the market value analysis is a tool that we commission. This will be our 4th iteration of it. The Reinvestment Fund conducts that. It's a tool that's used to assist governmental officials, even private sector actors in identifying various elements of the local real estate market that has an opportunity to look at not only what the sales of properties have taken place throughout the city, but also taking a look at what other conditions that exist, whether there's vacancy, distinguishing vacancy between blight, looking at permits, looking at construction, looking at vacant land, looking at all of those indicators in order to determine where the investments need to be on a public sector side. Because as we recognize, the private market, as we've all identified, is going to operate and doesn't need that level of public investment. And the private market is not necessarily, is not as concerned as the affordability crisis might be for individuals who are either renters or homeowners, if for that matter. So we, as a public entity, look at all those indicators and look to see where the market is changing or has changing so that we can deploy the limited investments that we have to ensure that we are making those strategic investments, whether it's a neighborhood that is tipping from one to the other, whether or not the neighborhood needs further public investment. Not that the public investment will be the only investment, but that the public investment is that catalytic investment in order to turn that particular neighborhood. And as you see, as you indicated, all of the purple areas and the areas in purple are folks and areas in the neighborhoods in 2023 that doesn't need any level of public investment. If I went back 10 years ago, those areas, the light purple areas, which are areas B2 and the blue Cs, they weren't those colors. What we've seen is the increase in what the value and properties have sold for over the course of the past few years. We've got the market value. It indicates what the median sales prices of homes were. As Laurie indicated earlier, The value of homes have continued to go up. Those individuals who don't need that level of investment are still marshaling on. But as I look at this map, we look in deciding where our public investments are in those areas that are in the F, G, and H markets, recognizing that's where our level of public investments need to be and what we are doing. And as a result of that, what we've done at the Redevelopment Authority is that we have been able to invest $42 million over the course of the past 9 years of dollars, direct investment dollars in housing, particularly in homeownership. What we've been doing with that is that we are providing a couple of things. One, in the form of land at a deep discount, a nominal discount. From that, we've provided additional subsidy in the form of some development subsidy, some additional home buyer assistance subsidy that's needed. We married that with the city's down payment assistance program. And I'm highlighting all of that because it's an actual layering that has to take place even to create that home ownership opportunity. No different than what you're doing when you're doing a multifamily transaction, that all the layering for all those other dollars that need to be placed into that. And I did say that because it's that level that is required in order for us to really address and to make a real direct impact on this affordability issue. It's not just the creation of the one-time creation of that one unit for whatever that period of time is. And as we were talking in the back, and I was overhearing a conversation in the back, and they were talking about households and the number of households that we have currently. We've got to realize that over the course of the past 5-6 years, every one of us have had some family member of some sort that has laid and stayed either on our sofa or in our den because they were displaced and or couldn't afford to either make the rent, afford to retain their home for whatever period of time. They may not have been counted at that time, but nonetheless, there's still a need for a housing opportunity that exists out there. And so I talk about our approach relative to that is also talking about, again, land, subsidy, state subsidy, local subsidy. And the other piece that we've also learned is that we've entered into a unique partnership, the Redevelopment Authority, with our city and soon to be a partnership with our school board, whereby those surplus properties that those cities have, that they're no longer in commerce, will never be put back into commerce, and I wink wink at my city colleague here, that will never be put back into commerce, that can create those levels of affordable housing opportunities. One thing that we know and we've learned throughout all of our business that we've done across, the cost of land is expensive. The reduction, if you can reduce or eliminate the cost of land, you are furthering a transaction that can take place and that will take place. And a recognition of what your role is and not expecting a lot on the upside other than the creation of that housing opportunity. And so as I think about some of the other things that we do, we lease those lands for a nominal amount for 99 years. We ensure that the requirement is that they provide that level of affordable housing into that and for that community. And that we're speaking to in those neighborhoods where individuals either would not have invested or neighborhoods that there ought to be a housing opportunity for someone who's a low to moderate income individual. I'll just wrap up with just a couple of items that I wrote down as to how do we work toward solving the affordability issue, leveraging the assets. That leveraging assets mean both city, state, and local. That also requires a little bit more collaboration, coordination from all of those other organizations and entities with that same goal of developing and creating that affordable housing opportunities. The pilots, as Marjorianna mentioned, one of the things that we do is we've been building better, smarter, stronger, and safer. That means requiring fortified standards in all of our work, addressing some stormwater requirements and mandating that as part of our work. Some of those other Energy Star various versions, not just the appliances, but I'm talking about when you're doing the windows, all of those things help to create that level of sustainability and resiliency for those individuals. Who is the person that is most impacted by any trauma that might take place in the community? Those people that, not the people that lived in the blue area that I mentioned on the map, it's those people that live in the gold and the yellow. Those are the ones that we have to ensure that we provide that for. And then the last thing, just a better use of publicly owned land as we talk about solutions to help to address this affordability issue. With that, I say thank you, and I'm going to be quiet.
All right, thank you, Brenda, and thanks to all three of our panelists for some very interesting remarks. Let me kick it off by just one or two questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So first, this one's directed at Laurie, but certainly Brenda and Marjorianna, you're welcome to chime in. You spoke about the ability to expand access to credit, and I sort of, I'm with you with a lot of the points that you were making, but if I put my devil's advocate hat on, sort of two sort of fundamental issues come to my mind. Number one, I think we did see that in a sort of extreme way in the housing boom of the mid-2000s, to the point where, we then had a foreclosure crisis, which obviously devastated lots of families and households and entire communities. So is there sort of a happy medium? Do you think, given where we are today in terms of the credit box, it's obviously much tighter than where it was, 20 years ago. Is there some happy medium? And are we, do you have any thoughts about, like, how do we expand it in a way that we don't sort of get over our skis and sort of, increase the probability that we get into a crisis? And then secondly, from a housing affordability perspective, right, it strikes me that anything that increases housing demand, and surely expanding the credit box is going to increase housing demand, right, is going to lead to higher prices and perhaps less affordability. And so how do we sort of break that type of effect?
So let me actually take those questions in pieces. So on the first piece, what we had in the 2005 to 2007 era was totally crazy in terms of credit availability, because basically it didn't rely on any documentation. What I'm saying, expand access to credit, I'm not saying invent your income, invent your wealth. What number would you like? What I'm saying is count the income that you have. Fully count the income from that school teacher who teaches summer school 2 years out of 3. Fully count the income from that person who has a job, full-time job, and drives an Uber, sometimes 5 hours a week, sometimes 20 hours a week. Document it using bank statements. I'm not saying, suspend it, sort of suspend reason. I think there's a lot of, basically credit got way too loose during the 2005 to 2007 period. We had sort of reasonable credit standards in 2001 to 2003. We had about a 12% marginal probability of default, went up to about 17% during the great financial crisis, went down to, and now it's around 5%. So we've got half the credit availability that we did during a period of reasonable credit standards. Let's go back. And we've cut the default rate once you do. We've cut the default rate from 90 plus to foreclosure considerably, which we're giving no credit to. So I think we could have a much wider credit box than we do now and still be safe. In terms of the demand, so let's think about this. I demand 1 unit of housing, whether I'm a homeowner or a renter for my family. Kris, for your family, you demand 1 unit of housing, whether you're a homeowner or a renter. So does Brenda, so does Marjorianna. So everyone demands 1 unit of housing. So when I turn from a renter into a homeowner, I would argue I'm not actually increasing demand. I would argue home prices are actually set by supply, by sort of new supply, which is single family plus multifamily plus manufactured housing minus obsolescence, versus demand, which is new household formation. So it's supply versus demand at the margin. So if I go, and then your tenure choice, that is whether I'm a homeowner or renter, depends on things like credit availability. But either way, I'm still one household who demands 1 unit of housing. Then you say, well, gee, why did home prices go up so much during the COVID period? It was because household formation went crazy. It wasn't because of, obviously, low interest rates made things more affordable, but historically the relationship between interest rates and home prices is actually zero. It's actually because household formation was so robust during the COVID period. So, I would argue that, sort of increasing credit availability doesn't increase demand. It transforms me from a renter into a homeowner. I still demand 1 unit of housing.
And I would like to add, on our homeownership side, it's important that for LHC that we diversify the funding that we have. A lot of our funding is federal related from HUD or IRS, the Treasury, and it caps affordability at 80% AMI. So it's important to us to find other ways to diversify so that we could serve what we call that middle income, that middle market, lost middle market, that we have not been able to serve, but we're starting to. And one way we're starting to do that is with taxable bonds. With those bonds, we can provide down payment assistance, which we have, to households that go up to 120, 130, 140 AMI. So those are people well-suited who just need a little bit of assistance to get into those homes and get their, make it affordable. And I think also, as Brenda said, reducing the acquisition costs in terms of the land. If we have local governments that would help in that area, where we are not also tacking on the land for development, that also helps affordability.
Excellent. We're running a little bit, not too low on time, but I want to make sure we get some questions from the audience. Why don't we go ahead and start that? And,
Right. So since I'm holding the mic, I'm going to be selfish and I'm going to take the first question for myself. Totally unfair and unreasonable, but
it's your conference,
but I am holding the microphone. You brought up a question. You brought up an issue earlier about elderly and people being locked into the spaces that they're in now because of these historically low rates. Are people locked in who actually own their homes because the idea of buying a home now becomes prohibitive because the price of anything else they could buy, even though they own their current home, still keeps them trapped because the price of a new home would be cost ineffective? Or is it also, could it be the case that I don't want to take on a mortgage with the rates being what they are now, even though I own this and I could put all of that equity towards a new house? The idea of even carrying a minimal mortgage with these high rates are keeping those types of people locked in. So is the lock-in effect bigger than just those who have a low interest rate, is the simple question.
And possibly, but I think that for a lot of folks, it's just not smart math for them. So it's not necessarily cost prohibitive. If they wanted to, they could, but it's just not smart. It doesn't make sense for a lot of people. I was at a conference just a couple weeks ago, and acting director Todman was there from HUD, and she talked about that, and she said, hey, I'm one of those people who benefited from the very low interest rates. I'm not going to move into another house that's going to cost more when I can stay in the house that I'm in. It's going to cost more because the cost of real estate is higher and the interest rate. So it just makes sense for a lot of folks to just stay who would have otherwise maybe downsize, just things that we have normally, traditionally seen as people age or people make decisions to move on. Well, even larger homes would free up smaller homes maybe that might be available for first-time homeowners, or people with larger homes that may downsize to something smaller. We're just not seeing those transitions in the current marketplace that we have seen 10, 20, 30 years ago because of the dynamics in the marketplace, such as interest rates.
Yeah, I would argue, yes, I would argue the same thing. It's 95% interest rates because you've experienced depreciation that while your new home has gone up, your potential new home has gone up in value, the home you're living in has gone up in value. So it's really just that differential that's affected in terms of home price appreciation, but the whole value of the home is affected in terms of interest rates, and that's where the real lock-in is.
Can I take a stab real quick? I think it's important to separate the two effects. One is the pure interest lock-in effect, which I think is because the vast majority of homeowners who have mortgages have a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage. And that specific mortgage is what's generating these lock-in effects. You don't see these lock-in effects in other countries where, we're one of the few countries where the majority of our mortgage products are 30-year fixed-rate mortgages, right? And then the second issue is both the combination of higher prices, especially from the COVID pandemic, as well as the high interest rates. And I think those are two sort of separate issues. And I think it's important to keep that in mind when we're thinking about policies to confront them.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Leo Marsh. I'm with Habitat for Humanity. First of all, I'd like to say thanks to Brenda for thinking that I look honest enough that you left your purse in your bag here.
I did.
Yeah, well, that's cool. You have no money in your wallet, by the way.
I knew it.
But we have found recently, because we're having this massive issue with some of our homeowners and the insurance problem, and in addition to just insurance going up, what we've noticed is that, and then verified, people with lower credit scores pay more in insurance. And very few people realize that, and it is a huge difference. So we did some more research, and I think there may be 5 states that outlaw that. Right now, there's a bill up to try and outlaw it, stop it here. I don't think it's going to happen because of the environment that we're in. Would you all comment on that, and are there ways to find this low-hanging fruit and maybe fix it if we could?
I just take a stab at it to say that you're thinking about the environment that we're in may not lead to that being outlawed, and I would say that that's correct. I think that the direction that the insurance commissioner is going in is that to reduce regulation. His thinking is if regulation is reduced, more insurance providers will be drawn back to the state, and then because there's a competitive environment, costs would go down. So I don't think that we're going to see regulation, but I can tell you it's very frightening to me. It's one of the things that keep me up at night, particularly on our multifamily side. A lot of our developments, especially the smaller ones, so I'd say under 40 units, they're struggling. My fear, and I've told this to a lot of to my staff, is that someone will just leave the keys at the front desk and say, you do what you need to do, because a lot of our developments are operating in the red, and if they're in the black, they're just barely in the black. It truly is. I would say that the insurance issue is the biggest issue facing affordable housing. And then when you talk about home ownership, homeowners are also, they're seeing increases every year, $200, $300 per mortgage per month. That's huge. That's a huge increase. And then also, I'm hoping that maybe there'll be some legislation regarding citizens of last resort, because with that insurance, there are certain premiums limits that are set by the legislature. So I don't remember exactly the percentage, but the insurance through Citizens is a certain percentage higher than what would be obtained from the open market.
10%.
Okay, thank you. I should have known you would have known. I'm sorry. Thank you so much. But it would be great if we could just to tackle that would be helpful. So it's huge. It's a huge issue right now.
Yeah, I'm going to add on to what Marjorianna said, although I have a little less optimism with respect to deregulation. Yeah, I'm just going to be quite frank with you. And I'm one of those people who was directly impacted by the insurance, and not because I live in an area that requires flood insurance, because it doesn't, but that's a whole nother story. But so I'm a little less optimistic about that. I do see that the direct impact to those individuals who are at low to mod income individuals, and the increased insurance. And one of the things I know that while it's not the silver bullet, is that how we build and what we build needs to have that level of sustainability, and that make that requirement. So if individuals make that investment in putting up either fortified roof or building that a little bit smarter, a little bit more resilience, that there ought to be a direct benefit of that, and then educating our insurance market that, one, they did it, and two, there ought to be some kind of mandated a reduction in the cost of that, so that you can receive that benefit. Multiply that little investment about that, putting that fortified roof up there. If it's an additional $2,000, $3,000, a one-time expense, multiply that over the number of years of that home and or that mortgage. And you do that for that 30-year, and that offset by that potential decrease in your insurance. I mean, you've seen it, we've seen it, it has a direct impact. And so as we build and talk about mandating, building new, and this new construction that we're doing, we ought to be thinking a little bit beyond what's directly in front of us, and then talk about what that impact will be for those individuals. Less optimistic about deregulation, though.
Yeah,
gotta say
I
that.
don't know. Look, I agree with you, but he is the insurance commissioner.
I
but-
agree he
yes,
is.
but that is the path that he's taken. And I don't know what the results are gonna be, but that's the path.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Will Bradshaw. I'm a professor of practice here at Tulane and the CEO of Reimagined Development Partners. Two-part question, kind of. You know, my former company, we have a portfolio, mostly small multifamily stuff. We've built up probably across the board 40% loss of value in the last 3 years. And what we have identified is that because of a unique aspect of household growth in New Orleans, which is our renter household growth is flat, and our homeowner household growth is like off the charts. We believe that by selling into a homeowner purchase market, we can actually restore some portion of that value and create new wealth building opportunities for low and moderate income residents, right? Selling units in high opportunity neighborhoods at $200,000, $250,000 a door, stuff that you can't do in New Orleans right now. But we can't get, like our buyers can't get financing for a condo product. So just sort of general thoughts on that problem.
No, that's very interesting. I haven't heard about that on the investor side. So what is some of the pushback that you're getting or you're hearing of in terms of the condo?
It's the first 50% of the units have to be
Yeah.
non-affordable. And
Oh,
nobody
so
wants
mixed
to hold
rate.
the units in-
Okay.
Yeah, so, yeah,
Yeah.
so federal financing is supposed to step up here. You know, you look at one of the condo production is at its low as a percent of total for sale production. It's also at its low if you look at sort of total rent, if you look at sort of multifamily units, you look at condo versus total multifamily units, it's also at a multi-year low. So federal financing is extremely restrictive. In addition, in the wake of Surfside, the GSEs and FHA, the GSEs in particular, imposed some additional restrictions in terms of you have to certify the health of the building that no condo board would reasonably do. None of us would sign that would sign that paper. I mean, it's basically, in my view, something that and, you know, so for so many people, condos are the way into their first home ownership. And that's something that certainly needs to be reexamined at the federal level. You're right, the restrictions are way too onerous.
Any solutions?
Yes, with a stroke of a pen, you can make those restrictions less onerous. Again, it goes back to what probability of default we are prepared to tolerate as a society in order to get people into home ownership.
That's true. That is so true.
All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I see that there are still several hands, but there is 10 seconds. So I'm going to extend the break, and then you can just query these folks. So we'll have a 15-minute break, and you can just beat them up with questions individually as they try and go and get snacks. So let's reconvene in 15 minutes. But thank you all for this very informative panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was very good. Very interesting.